We as homebrewers are trying to expand the palette of character creation for D&D 5e, and as a DM, I know especially getting into this game, it can be a little difficult to figure out, is this class going to be okay? You get a little bit of anxiety thinking about like, I don't know, is this going to mess up my game? Yada, yada, yada. Me, as somebody that's been DMing for a pretty long time now, I really know the ins and outs of the system, and I've designed several of my own options. I'm here to tell you about the classes that I personally allow at my tables and maybe expose you to some new ones that you hadn't quite seen yet. So the first one that we're going to start off with is the Accursed by Ross Leiser, also known as Outlandish Adventure Productions. The Accursed is a character that not only are they bearing a curse, but they have embraced it and conquered it. They are able to extend this curse to other creatures. It is a half-caster. This is a major like debuffer, possible blaster, possible like frontliner. It's a really flexible class. And what Ross has built out here really says a lot for what magic can mean in your world. This is what I mean by like a class that as soon as you allow it, you can quite literally paint out an entire plotline and history behind why this system of magic exists in your world. I love Ross's casters. Ross comes up with extremely interesting magic systems. I've said on here before, you know, some of the other ones that are going to appear in here, the Sculptor, the Shaman, the Odic, like Ross really understands what makes a magic system interesting for D&D 5e. So I highly praise his work. Go check out the Accursed, and the link for that's going to be down in the description below, as well as a big, long, like 3-hour interview where Ross and I, and this is an old interview, we're talking through the Accursed. Ross actually breaks down several design decisions that he was making, you know, throughout the entire class. I love what this class does for narrative. I've currently had, I think, 3 players actually take this class. Currently running Icewind Dale, and one of the characters is doing the Curse of Lycanthropy. And it's been interesting to see him really play out the Navigator because they get proficiency with, well, expertise with perception checks that rely on, you know, your sense of smell. So it's been funny to watch someone that's not a ranger just like, you know, scouting out and everything. I really love the roleplay that this class evokes. So yeah, that's the Accursed by Ross Leiser. The Artificer, I'm okay with allowing at my tables with one exception. I ban one subclass, and that's the Alchemist. The only reason why I do that is actually because I allow for an entire Alchemist class. And the Alchemist class that I allow at my tables is the Alchemist by Mage Hand Press, designed by Mike Hollick. To me, alchemy doesn't always necessarily seem innately magical. You know, the fantasy, the lore, really all the fiction that has been tied into alchemy as an entire system doesn't really come off to me as something that is innately magical in a way. Sure, you're making these potions that may have a magical effect, but I don't know that the Alchemist really feels right as a spellcaster. So the narrative on it on Artificer and the complaints people have about the general power of that subclass led me to just open up this entire Alchemist class. Again, this is one that I did an interview with Mike Hollick on my channel a while back. He talked me through every one of the features. I personally played this one on a podcast. It's called Scales and Tales, where I played Clot, the Kobold Ooze Rancher Alchemist. All the different subclasses for this one are extremely funny. Like, there's the ones that will hit the mark for you for what you're really expecting out of an alchemist, you know? The Amorist, I love the Ooze Rancher. God, I just absolutely adore the Ooze Rancher. There's a whole Mad Bomber Alchemist in there. Like, seriously, go check this thing out. Mage Hand Press, they are one of the only like OGL publishers out there really doing super well. And part of it is because of the success of their classes. So I highly recommend the Alchemist by Mage Hand Press. Next up, we got some standards: Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, and then we're getting to my first class, and that is the Dancer. The Dancer is a class that I designed in order to be a very high support, completely spellless martialist. And it was an experiment because I was trying to think of like, okay, is there any way in D&D to possibly build a support that gets across the same level of power as somebody like, you know, a cleric or druid, but make it completely spellless? And this one, you know, it was inspired a lot by Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy. The ability for this Dancer to be able to distribute like new actions to other creatures is Really experimental. All the playtest feedback on it I've gotten on it has been extremely positive. Thank all of you that have given me, reviews. I see a lot of the stuff in my comments and in my live stream stuff. So it's been great to hear that feedback. Consider me biased, but yeah, I designed the class, so I allow the Dancer by Taron Pounds. From there, we've got the Druid and the Fighter, and the only changes I made to the Fighter is that I don't allow the Eldritch Knight, and I'll get into why. But skipping over that for right now is actually the Gunslinger by Heavy Arms. I am kind of doing a little bit of hype on this one, but the Gunslinger by Heavy Arms hits all the Wild West rootin' tootin' cowboy vibes I ever wanted out of a Gunslinger. Whenever I said in my video that I felt like this archetype could be expanded into a full class, that's exactly what Heavy Arms did. He hit all these beautiful, beautiful cowboy story tropes. You get a Maverick, which feels like your real outlaw gunslinger. You get your, I think it's called the Revelator, which is your gun priest. They all have some major classic gunslinger Wild West vibes to them, and that's exactly the kind of story, the kind of flavor I wanted to inject into my homebrew world. And I allow this one in the Forgotten Realms as well because I think this one just totally hits the mark for firearms. The interesting thing about this one, and what kind of distinguishes it from Fighter, is that sure, you're using these devastating weapons, but they get this playable, flexible, reduced crit range, which has been super sick, and it makes firearms really feel, they could just be crossbow reskins, but they really feel devastating with this subclass, or this full class. The second that you insert guns into your world, you really paint a whole new historical perspective on the fantasy for your world. I love this whole idea of guns and dragons. There's just something so sick about that gunpowder mage fantasy. This one is still in playtest, so I'm doing a little bit of hype for a buddy here as well. But somebody who I immensely respect as a designer. That is going to be the Gunslinger by Heavy Arms. As soon as that's available, I'll edit the description below to the link where you can go and find that. Okay, so riffing off of the Fighter, the next one is actually going to be the Magus. Now, the reason why I banned the Eldritch Knight is because I just think that the Magus comes along and does everything that the Eldritch Knight wants to do, but evokes so much more of the spell sword flavor. This is another one I did a full review here on the channel for, in kind of a Final Fantasy style. This is a class that I have been dying to play, but have never been able to get on a table to play. This class takes a lot of the interesting aspects of the Eldritch Knight and completely expands them out into a full, robust class with multiple different subclasses that hit all these interesting, inspirational ideas for what your spell sword could be. As someone who's raised on Final Fantasy, this one totally scratched every single itch I had been really, craving out of a spell sword. It does so masterfully. I cannot recommend the Magus by Benjamin Huffman enough. Next one's going to be another one of my classes, and that's the Merchant. And I know I keep bringing this up, but this is also inspired by a lot of Merchant class options from classic JRPGs. The Merchant is one that I designed that is meant to be Charisma's answer to the Artificer, where, the Artificer is meant to be a big supplier for the whole party, right? I want to make sure that everyone's got magic items, yada, yada, yada. The Merchant is one that I designed to be a full-on support in a completely bizarre and different way compared to other options that you get in the game, where you get this inventory that you can restock and possibly just pull out a bunch of ball bearings, a bunch of potions, whatever. All the different subclasses are based around different merchant guilds. You've got the blacksmith, you've got the apothecary, you've got, the pet dealer, the mariner now. I just updated it not super long ago. Swindler and the traveler. And the esotericist. So if you want to sell magic items, scrolls, all that stuff. So you can see the streams here on the channel where I've streamed the design process on both the Dancer and the Merchant. So go check out the Merchant. So now next in my homebrew worlds, I banned the Monk. In Forgotten Realms, it's totally fine. This is just a complete personal kind of opinion on the Monk as a class. It hits some mystical vibes that don't really mesh well with the world of Lawenta as I have in my mind. I personally don't really have any big issues with the Monk. Sure, it might underperform compared to some other options. There is a class that I do recommend instead, but overall the Monk is a harasser, kind of controller, striker that I feel like it's just sort of missing a little bit of love in D&D 5e. And yeah, the whole mysticism of like key and everything doesn't, I don't know, it just didn't really gel with the world that I was creating. So yeah, it's totally fine for play. It's just one that I personally don't allow at my homebrew world. Next one up, Paladin, I absolutely don't have a problem with. I am working on a Scion that I hopefully will be able to allow at my tables. Like, I mean, if I wrote it, I'm going to hope that it's going to be at that, point. That's one that I'm working on with Dan Felder. The next one up is going to be the Odic by Ross Leiser, another one from Ross. This is, so I always say this. I saw Ross's sculptor, and that's how I found Ross. I went through the Accursed, and I became a really big fan of Ross. Then I checked out the Odic, and then I immediately knew, like, Ross is one of the best class designers out there right now. This class does you could call it a blood mage in a way. The Odic is a class that focuses on sacrificing hit points in order to cast spells. And it's a risky playstyle, and this is a class that I don't recommend absolute newer players jump into because it's a bit difficult, right? But I think veteran players of D&D are going to feel like, okay, if I want to be that really selfless kind of a character, this feels like a really great support option. And me getting to kind of interplay with the hit point mechanic for casting is going to feel, it's going to get that sort of grimmer blood mage feel across, but without being like incredibly edgy, I dig the Odic a lot, and the kind of character that I think a player is going to be inspired to play with this class. Like I said, it is a little bit more difficult, and I think that difficulty has kind of pushed some of the players at my table away from really getting into the class. But those of us that have played, more than a few characters in this game are going to find a lot to love out of this class, and it's really unique. It's almost like tattoo casting. There's a whole lot of cool flavor in this one. Just go check out the Odic. All right, so the next one that I've got up is the reason why I don't allow the monk at my table for my homebrew world, and that's the Pugilist by Benjamin Huffman. The Pugilist filled a lot of gaps in D&D, which is part of what made it one of the highest selling character options, probably maybe second if it hasn't surpassed the Blood Hunter by Matthew Mercer. I find that most players that come to my table that want to play a monk are really just trying to play this like bare knuckle kind of a hero, right? That the monk just doesn't really get across quite like the Pugilist does. I think part of that being that the monk just innately feels so much squishier than a Pugilist. A Pugilist doesn't care about getting hit. They encourage it, You're going to feel like a monk-barbarian hybrid without it, like, being a reskin, There's enough unique mechanics in here, a lot of, like, real intentional care for the roleplay flavor of, what does it mean to be a Pugilist outside of combat? Benjamin knew exactly what this was meant to be, right? Like, as someone that loves watching boxing, MMA, all that stuff, this class absolutely got it right. There's a huge reason why this is one of the top selling homebrew classes on the DM's Guild. So the next one's up, we have, of course, the Ranger. I just allow for all the optional class features that are in Tasha's. Rogue, same story there. The next one I allow is the Sculptor by Ross Leiser. I know I include a lot of Ross's work in here. He's, like I said, buddy of the channel, and just a great designer overall. This is a class that scratches a lot of the classic like anime tropes of you can literally manifest a weapon, like you're kind of a living weapon. One of the core strengths of Monk I always feel is that Monk cannot be disarmed technically. So they're always going to remain combat relevant even if they don't have like a weapon on hand, right? Well, that's what this Sculptor is all about. This one's getting a remaster, so it's a little hard for me to speak on it right now, because I don't know what all features Ross is going to include in the future, but this is a mana-based magical class, so again, go check this one out. Like I said, really praise Ross's work. And then go figure, the next one up is going to be the Shaman. You all have seen me do the layout work on this one here on the channel. I will be doing a discussion with Ross Leiser because this is a new release of his. Ross went through a lot of work to make ritual casting the core identity of an entire class. Really hit a lot of the, I hate to say tropes here, but really hit a lot of the thematics of what shamanism has meant to a lot of different cultures. Really went the extra mile actually to contact several sensitivity readers to look over the work and make sure he wasn't, cartoonizing some of these religions. This is another one of those classes that kind of similar to Warlock, right? Where you get your subclass option, but you also get a spirit guide. Like, you know, Warlock has their Pact and then their Pact Boon and all their Eldritch Invocations. It's really modular in that way and makes a ton of variable character options with a whole bunch of different evocative playstyles. There's been a lot of attempts to try and bring a Shaman to D&D, but I don't think anything quite did the Shaman justice until I saw this class. And there were some design choices that I even questioned with Ross, right? Like, why is this a charisma caster? And then Ross is able to convince me, like, yeah. So Ross has done a lot of work on this one. The Shaman, just a disclaimer here, I did do the layout work on this one, so I do get a royalty cut if you decide to go and pick this one up, but I recommend it. Just, you know, go check it out for yourself. The next one up is going to be The Scholar by Benjamin Huffman. This is one that I recommend for players whenever we're doing a much more out of combat focused kind of a campaign. This one still has its combat relevance, and its subclasses can provide something unique for combat. But I think that Scholars are going to feel a lot more love in a high like intrigue, mystery, puzzle kind of a campaign. It does have its combat relevance. Like, I'm not going to lie there. It has its position in combat, but this is the way that I think you can make a support sort of a tactician in a way that isn't so heavily relied on like spell casting like we currently see with a lot of the official options. I've had requests to do a breakdown of the Scholar on my channel, so that is something I will be doing in the future. But for now, just know I do approve this class. The next one up is going to be the Sorcerer. I don't have any problems with the way that the Sorcerer currently functions. The only class that the only subclass I currently have banned is the Clockwork Soul, because that thing is just off the rails. The next one up is going to be the Warden by Mage Hand Press. Same people that made the Alchemist. The Warden is a super heavy frontliner. From playing a lot of MOBAs, if you played like League of Legends or Smite, Dota, anything like that, these are supports over in those games are meant to do a function called peeling, right? Where you want to be able to get enemies off of your allies. There's not really a great way to do that outside of maybe like Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, maybe the Compelled Duel spell in D&D 5e. But the Warden takes this and just completely makes it a full class, right? Not only are you a great tank, but you're also great at just getting enemies off of your buddies. It is a full martialist. Go check this one out. Mage Hand Press. I may do a review on this one at some other point in my channel. I have allowed this one at my tables. I've had 2 Wardens so far sitting at my tables. Both of them just knew immediately it's my job to take hits and get these goblins off my buddies. So yeah. I really dig the Warden. Warlock, I love this class. I don't really know what more to say about it. It's just one of the best, like roleplay wise classes that we currently have in the game. It feels like as soon as you roll up a Warlock, I'm excited to DM for that because I immediately know what kind of narrative we're going to get out of the story just by having a Warlock at the table. All the class features are super incredibly customizable. It's so modular with all the different Eldritch Invocations, a great spell list, really interesting subclasses, and just interesting mechanics all around that we don't see in any other caster in 5e. I love Warlock. And the last one that I have is the Wizard. I haven't currently made any changes to the Wizard. I've thought about the possibility of designing a version of the Wizard where it incorporated some of the Order of the Scribes features in the base class, because those are all just super cool for the overall identity of what it means to be a wizard, that it felt like it was, oh man, it felt like a bit of a shame that not every wizard could do some of the things that scribes could do. But for now, D&D 5e Wizard, I have absolutely zero problems with this class. Some of the subclasses that were in Unearthed Arcana are questionable in terms of balance, but like, I have zero problems with anybody rolling up any of the wizards that currently appears in any of the official books. So those are the different classes that I allow at my tables and why I might have certain options banned, removed, whatever. So yeah, I think I've talked here on the channel before about a lot of class options that I just think are like way too good for the game. And this is kind of me pushing back and saying, wait. Okay, but I allow so many more options at my table. Like, I try to like make the overall palette of character expression so much more vast, rather than to say like, no, you can't play this. Like in the case of Alchemist, right? Like, I don't like what the Alchemist Artificer says for the narrative of alchemy. I just think that that subclass kind of fails at getting that across, you know? But the Alchemist, my mage hand presses so much closer to what I had envisioned. Or like, you know, Eldritch Knight and Magus, right? Like, I just think the Magus does that spell sword idea so much better. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. Did you find some new class in here that you immediately want to try out? Is there a class that I possibly missed that I need to know about? Let me know. I love finding these different character options that help me rethink my own like world building. I want to give a shout out to my Patreon sponsors. Thank you all so much for helping me keep the lights on around here and coffee in my blood. You all are absolute heroes. Go check out some of my content over on the DMs Guild. Come check me out over on Patreon. I just opened up some new tiers over there, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, why not come check that out and get some cool new D&D content. That's going to be it for this one. Subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you all are staying safe, staying healthy, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.